Good morning, sir. Good morning, class. My name is Captain McCraw. I'm here with Captain Wright, Lieutenant Johnson, and we are here to brief interagency operations. This brief is highly educational and unclassified and filled with sugar and spice and everything. That's next slide. Here's our agenda. Next slide. So first I'm going to start off with defining what interagency operations even means, because honestly that's something that we struggled with when we first got this. It's not very well defined. So how we define it is how all the different agencies and organizations at the national level in the U.S. come together to complete the nation's goals and support the Department of Defense. The fact is there are multitude of different organizations and agencies within the U.S. For example, just within the DoD itself, you have all the combat branches, Army, Navy, Air Force, you have intelligence agencies, you have logistics, DLA, DFAS, all those. Then you have Department of State, Department of Transportation, Agriculture, all those sub-organizations. There's dozens of them out there. And so, and all these agencies also have all their defined specialized roles in what they do, what they focus on. So what we're looking at is how these different agencies combine all of their special capabilities into one single unity of effort. And this effort is to ultimately support the nation's goals, the national defense, and then our goals as the Department of Defense. So obviously these different agencies that exist have, like I said, they all have very different roles. Some don't really support us at all. For example, the Department of Agriculture, what are they going to do for the Department of Defense? Others, though, have a very big role in what we, the Department of Defense, do. And so we picked out a couple agencies that have a big role in supporting us, and that is these four: Department of State, National Security Agency, Central Intelligence Agency, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So what we're going to do is we're going to define the roles, functions, capabilities, and limitations of the interagency community as a whole and what they do as a combined effort. And then we're also going to go in a little bit into these different agencies and get a little more specifically into what they do to support us. So first, starting off with roles. The interagency community as a whole ultimately sets the conditions for us, the Department of Defense, to conduct our international operations. Ultimately, we cannot do what we do without their influence and their efforts. If we try, that would be similar to, say, a company or battalion trying to conduct a mission without first having the staff, the supporting elements, do their part. So trying to go and attack that objective without first doing planning, mission analysis, recon, any of that kind of stuff would be completely detrimental, unwise, and impractical. So once again, they set the conditions, they allow us to then go and accomplish our goals and our missions. Another thing they do is they assist leaders, both at the national level and military leaders, with decision making. They use all of their specialized capabilities to collect information that is critical for our leadership to make the decisions, the policies that they do. And then finally, they also, once we are completing our operations on an international scale, they also assist us with some very specific threats and issues that we face, such as intelligence threats, counterintelligence, terrorist threats, criminal organizations, and so on. So, getting a little more into specifics, I'll start with Department of State. Department of State represents the U.S. interests on an international stage. They're the ones who kind of go in first, build those relationships with the foreign leaders, conduct negotiations, make treaties. They basically define what we then are able to do, whether it's having good relations with allied nations and allied militaries, or defining rules of engagement if it happens to be an enemy nation that we are encountering. They also advise the president on foreign affairs. National Security Agency, their main job is to monitor, collect information, analyze that information, disseminate that information to our leaders. They mainly do so with data and communication. So ultimately they're operating in the cyber realm. They mainly specialize in signals intelligence, or SIGINT. Their scope is primarily international. So they're ultimately dealing with other countries, whether it's offense, collecting that information, infiltrating networks, disrupting networks, and then also defense, preventing all those same actions against us. CIA is very similar in their role to the NSA. They're also collecting information, analyzing that information, giving to our leadership and make decisions, but they're more doing so on the human level, so human intelligence, humans. So they collect information about people, organizations, communities, and once again, also like the NSA, they're doing so on an international, within an international scope. So within foreign countries, primarily hostile countries. And then finally, you have the FBI. They are more about, not so much about intelligence gathering, but more on the action, actions, I guess, actions on the objective, you want to say that. So they're doing counterintelligence, criminal investigation, counterterrorism, and their main difference is that they operate on a domestic level. So they're primarily preventing all these threats against the U.S. and preventing those threats from coming into our borders. So moving on to functions. So functions is more, while roles is more, this is what they're responsible for, this is their purpose. Function is how they carry out those purposes. So looking again at the interagency community, the agencies as a whole, their primary functions are foreign affairs, information collection, and network, offense, and defense. So again, foreign affairs, like I was saying before, is meeting with allied and possibly enemy countries and their leaders. They're negotiating treaties, making deals, building relationships, and then ultimately they're trying to coordinate mutually beneficial efforts. For information collection, they're, again, also as I said before, they're going into those international networks, collecting information, whatever information they can, analyzing it, providing it to military and national leaders, enabling us to conduct operations and make decisions. And then network operation, or network offense and defense, attacking those networks and also preventing the same happening to us. As shown by this diagram here, all these different functions that these different agencies do allow us to do what we do best. So once again, going a little bit into the specifics with our different agencies here. We got Department of Defense. They are coordinating our U.S. representation abroad, building those relationships, saying, hey, foreign countries, this is what we want to do, this is the type of relationship we want to have with you, and here's the goals we're trying to accomplish. Let's work together on this. You have the NSA, who, once again, they're primarily working in the cyber domain, advising those leaders on the information they find, conducting their defensive and offensive operation, protecting us from cyber attacks, and also conducting cyber attacks, really information collecting and data collecting on foreign nations. You have the CIA, once again, do the same thing, but more on the human side, infiltrating those communities, organizations, finding out as much information as possible about people and places, and providing that information to us, the Department of Defense, and our leaders at the national level. And then finally, the FBI. As I said before, they are protecting domestically our country against these threats, and And also they do operate on an international scale a little bit. So they're helping us and our allies against criminal organizations, terrorist organizations, and so on. So I'll be followed by Lieutenant Johnson with the capabilities of these different agencies.
Afternoon, morning, Lieutenant Johnson. I'll be covering capabilities for Federal Bureau of Investigation, Central Intelligence Agency, the Department of State, and National Security Agency. So for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, they have 3 primary services that they've split their departments into to provide capabilities for. The first one is Criminal Justice Information Services, which their primary goal is to provide national statistics to basically go over, like, these are criminal activities that are happening in this area. The second is Critical Incident Response Group. They're pretty much our continuity of operations in the event of strategic information needing to be disseminated, in the event of crisis management needing to happen. They're kind of the people that we would go to for that. And then the last one is their laboratory service for the FBI. They have the world's largest laboratory service, which basically goes into allowing law enforcement, military, and all these other agencies to research everything from fingerprinting to, these are bomb fragments from a terrorist attack, who made it, how can we find partial fingerprints, things of that nature. Going into the Central Intelligence Agency, they have 5 main services that they provide. The Directorate of Operations is kind of like, they're the owners of the spy agency. They go in and they look at all of the information that they can acquire through various resources. The Directorate of Analysis, they're the ones that take ambiguous information and make it actionable so that the President, cabinets, senior policymakers can write foreign and national policies. Science and Technology basically goes in and it discusses, like, these are the equipment we have that we can do research on, we can study, to get an overall end state. And then Support and Digital Innovations is just like their R&R. It's how can we stay on top of everything else. Department of State is such a massive entity, but their primary capabilities are to provide support to foreign policy, to international affairs. They manage foreign budgets. They make sure that people abroad, living abroad, are taken care of, that they have full embassies and things of that nature. They stand in on the UN and they make sure that all the policies that are favorable to the US are being pushed. And then going into National Security Agency, it's understanding the threat, knowing the information assurance, signal intelligence, and cybersecurity. What that basically means to us, the so what behind that, is that they have the capability to, this is Osama bin Laden, this is where he's located, now we can give this actionable information to someone else to take action on it. The information assurance is now we have knowledge management, which allows for people to go in and look up criminal activities, to look up terrorist activities, to look up all the information that they need. And then things like signal intelligence is, we know that the enemy uses this type of radio, so we're going to take specific measures so that we can listen in on enemy conversations and so forth. And then cybersecurity is not only employing or having the capability to employ viruses against enemy nations and so forth, but it's also having the ability to detect malware that's being pushed on the US population and the ability to protect us from that. So what overall behind these 4 agencies is that they come together when events happen. So when Russia does a cyber attack on us, we get National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, which allows us to have 20 plus entities come together and do interagency operations and provide protection to us. And then you get things from like 9/11 where the Terrorist Threat Information Center is developed. So now they're fielding phone calls, they're doing everything to allow for the broad spectrum of the society to be safe from terrorist attacks. And that includes capabilities.
Hey, thanks, Lieutenant Johnson. So, my name's Captain Wright. I'll be dropping phones and covering the limitations of these agencies. All right, so the whole point of these agencies working together, they collaborate to collect data and really to do one of two things, either detect a current threat or prevent a future one, right? So that gives us the element of surprise, and it makes that the most, the element of highest value. Because that's a high value, that makes it, that's the thing that we focus on the most, right? So that means that the people who are going to go collect data become our most valuable asset. Okay, so if we're going to hire people to collect data, how do we do it? Because every single person that we hire is a potential security risk. Against every human, since we're all imperfect, against every human you can find a potential leverage point. Well, this is our first limitation. Who can we hire and who can we trust? And since our employees are entrusted with this at different degrees, that means we need to pay them in different degrees. So the idea is that we can pay our employees to compensate for the level of data that we trust them with. A budget was passed in 2015 for over $61 billion. And this is for the entire Department of National Information. And this is a big deal. This is called the black budget because once it's passed and it goes to the Department of National Information, nobody knows where that money goes or how it's distributed. It goes from the head of the department down to the department heads and is distributed down there. And it's not public information. I think it's higher than top secret. So the idea is that we protect our people and we protect our assets. Okay, so once we've hired people that go collect our data, how do we get it, right? And so since every agency falls under the executive branch, there's a check and a balance there that means that we have to undergo due process to collect the data. For everything that's collected and used, there has to be a corresponding warrant or a corresponding permission. Okay, so once we have the data, and I'll tell you that it's a universal law that you know more than you use. Well, the same is true for these agencies.